together with canvas wrapped around and a narrow hole in the back. It was not to hold the ship in one place. The sea anchor was to hold the ship's nose into the wind so that it would not turn sideways and capsize. And so they've got these 4 anchors out. People haven't eaten for 14 days and nights. They've I've been out on the ocean, but I've never been out on a deal like that. I've been out there when there's some 10 or 12-foot waves, but I've not been out there driven up and down. We had a gasoline or a diesel engine to pull us. They didn't have no diesel engine in there. They just had the wind, and the wind was trying to destroy them, and here they are. And everybody, no doubt many people were seasick. I went on a fishing expedition with a church one time. There was 28 of us went out of Morro Bay deep sea fishing, and out of the 28, it wasn't even a bad day. Out of the 28, 14 were seasick. And I was getting seasick, but I spent my last few dollars to go on that ship, and I started to get sick, and I just said, now, God, I spent my last money to go on this trip, and I'm going to catch fish if I have to barf over the rail while I do it. And finally, I started catching fish, and the seasickness left. But these people, for 14 days and nights, they're bouncing like a cork in the ocean. The wind is blowing, and it's terrible. And in the big middle of this, people think Pentecostal preachers are crazy. And here's a good reason for it. Here they are. People barfing over the rails, and they're throwing everything overboard, and they're worried they're going to die out on this deal. And up steps this Pentecostal preacher and said, be of good cheer. Don't worry about a thing. And he says, have you ever had anybody when they'll come to you and said, I told you so. Now, people don't like preachers to do that. Sometimes we have to do that. Said, you should have listened. And that's what Paul did. He said, you should have listened to me and not loosed from Crete. And we wouldn't have suffered this great harm and all. How many typhoons are come in your life because you didn't listen to what the Word of God said? How many times have you found yourself saying, I don't know if I can make it or not, because and so Paul, he just stands up there and he just says, be of good cheer, sirs. Let me read it to you again. He said, wherefore, sirs, be of good cheer. Now, how could you ever be happy in the middle of a storm like that? How could you be cheerful in the midst of those circumstances? The reason Paul could say that is, I believe what God said. And that's what I want to preach about this morning. I believe God. Notice what he says here in verses 23. For there stood by me this night the angel of God, whose I am. Now, he didn't say he was an angel. He was saying, I belong to God, and whom I serve, saying, fear not, Paul, thou must be brought before Caesar, and lo, God hath given thee all them that sail with thee. You might question God and say, why is this going on in my life? How come this is happening? How come all this trouble's coming my way? Well, let me tell you something. Paul was not upset at all, because he knew that he was supposed to go to Rome. No matter what happened in between the time he was put in jail and the time he got before Caesar, you say, how could God let that happen to a child of God? I want to tell you, there were souls in Rome that God wanted to save. There were people in Caesar's household that were on their way to hell, but God sent a preacher through a storm and said, you're going to Rome. And because of Rome, because of this Paul's determination to serve God and obey God and believe what God said, there are notes in Paul's writing that says, the saints at Rome salute you. Those of Caesar's household send you greetings. The only way that could have happened was for Paul to get to Rome. And for us to get where we're supposed to go, which is heaven, we are going to go through some times. But in the middle of those things, we need to keep in mind not so much what's going on as what God said. What God said. And the problem is when you're going through a difficulty in your life, you tend to look at the storm instead of the master of the storm. I've done it, you've done it. Does it make it right? No, it doesn't make it right. And we suffer through some things, and actually